Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you a look at a brand new lens from a brand new lens maker. The company Thypoch is a new lens maker that is targeting the Leica M-mount rangefinder crowd with their new Simera lineup of manual lenses. Now, the initial releases are a 28mm and a 35mm f1.4 lenses, and they do only come in Leica M-mount. The names Thypoch, which is a combination of two Old English words, and then Simera, which is a Greek word, they focus on individuality and living in the moment. Now, obviously, that's completely marketing, but it does reflect the fact that Thypoch is going after that Leica vibe and trying to capture both the kind of the aesthetic and the lifestyle, and then the overall feel of the lenses in the release of the Simera lineup. So the question is, as we look at the Simera 28mm f1.4 as the focus of today's review, have they nailed that Leica feel as a part of their design and the optical performance? Well, let's dive in and find out right after a word from our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Fantom Wallet, the minimalist modern wallet that is now even better with the new Fantom X that is crafted from aluminum right here in Canada. It is 22% smaller and 35% lighter, while still making it easy to access your cards and money when you need them, thanks to their unique fanning mechanism. You could even customize your wallet due to its modular design, with accessories like a money clip, cash holder, ID display, and even Chipolo and AirTag tracking integration. Visit store.fantomwallet.com to check out their unique sizes, styles, and finishes that span from aluminum to wood to carbon fiber, and use code DUSTIN15 for 15% off when you're ready to check out.
So as you can see, I'm looking at the silver version of the Simera 28mm f1.4, but both the 28mm and 35mm do come in both black and silver editions. The MSRP for these lenses is $699 US. And if that seems expensive to you for a manual focus compact lens like this, bear in mind that the Leica Summilux M 28mm f1.4 retails for $7,800 US. And so this lens is literally more than 11 times cheaper than what that lens is. But you wouldn't know it from the build quality. Everything is all metal here, which includes, by the way, the caps and the hood, which are frankly, the rear cap is maybe one of the nicest that I've ever seen, but everything here does have a lot of attention to detail. Now, as noted, the lens hood is all made of metal. It is kind of the rectangular style that you do see on a lot of Leica lenses, kind of following that old rangefinder aesthetic. But I will note that there is a limitation that comes as a part of that, in that the front cap is a slip over style. And so if you are using the front cap, it's either that or the lens hood, because you can't use both at the same time. So the aesthetic may look cool, but there is a price to pay for, in this case, I think that style is trumping over functionality. Now, the lens is very, very compact here. It is 54 millimeters in diameter, that's 2.1 inches, and it has a very compact 49 millimeter front filter thread, which seems to be a pretty common one amongst Leica M-mount 28 millimeter lenses. Now, the lens is 55 millimeters, just 1 millimeter longer in its overall length, that's 2.2 inches, and it weighs in at 330 grams, or 11.6 ounces. So that's about 110 grams less than the aforementioned Leica Summilux lens. And so obviously, if you're looking to travel light, getting the f1.4 aperture and an all-metal build while also staying fairly lightweight is an added bonus here. Now, this is a manual everything lens, which is pretty common on Leica and the rangefinder bodies, but everything is nicely executed here. The manual focus ring has really nice, it's all in metal, of course, and it has really nice knurled sections that each have individualized grip, so very easy to grip. The focus ring moves very, very smoothly, and there is a couple of unique features here. There is a little bit of additional drag that is at 0.7 meters. Minimum focus distance is 0.4 meters, but at 0.7 meters, there's some additional drag, and the intent of that is that on rangefinder bodies, that's as close as they will actually focus, and so beyond that, you have to switch to live view if you want to get accurate focus up close. So it's designed to just kind of let you know you're entering into that territory. On the other end of the approximately 100 to 110 degrees of focus rotation, there's actually an infinity lock there. I'm not convinced that it's entirely necessary, but it is a cool looking feature. You do have to, once it's in that lock position, you have to just depress this little tension knob here, and so it will release to allow you to rotate back out of there. This is an internally focusing lens, which does actually set it apart as superior, in fact, to some of the Leica counterparts. The lens has a nicely executed aperture ring near the front of the lens, and so you have a couple of different options. Surprisingly, you actually have a click declip option on this lens, and so you can choose to click it, and you will have 1/3 stop detents that are really nicely defined all the way through f8. After f8, you have single stop detents for f11 and f16. Now, if you're in the declick mode, obviously you can smoothly rack through that entire aperture iris range, and as you can see here, the other bonus here is there is a beautiful 14 bladed aperture iris that stays really beautifully round as you open and close it, and so that is a very, very nice addition. Kind of another cool, I almost call it an Easter egg here, that I didn't initially notice, but only noticed after using it for a while. And that is that rather than having a traditional hyperfocus scale, instead what you have is you have these little red dots that start to fill in as you stop the lens down. And so each one of those corresponds to the position where you can put the infinity symbol if you're wanting to achieve proper hyperfocal distance. And so just kind of a unique bespoke touch there that I found very, very cool. Now, as noted previously, the minimum focus distance is 0.4 meters or 40 centimeters. That is not particularly close for a 28mm lens, though in many cases, close focus doesn't seem to be a priority with a lot of the Leica lenses. But in this case, you have roughly a 0.09 times magnification, which as you can see is not particularly high. The build quality, however, is actually really, really nice. Everything is very beautifully executed here, and there's a really fine attention to detail, which I appreciate. This, for those that appreciate lenses that are, you know, also kind of engineered pieces of art, this is something that will probably delight you both in the tactile sense, but also in the overall aesthetic look. They're great looking lenses, and they handle very nicely. Now, image quality here comes via an optical formula of 11 elements in 7 groups. Now, that includes an ED element, an aspherical element, and 3 HR or high refractive index elements as a part of the design. Another welcome surprise as a part of the optical design is a floating element that allows you to get better performance up close. And again, it's that attention to detail that has impressed me as a part of this brand new lens maker and their design. So we'll give you a quick breakdown of overall performance here. You can see from the MTF chart that we've got a good performance in the center of the frame, a pretty good performance mid-frame, and then weaker corner performance, and a little bit of improvement across the board as you stop it down. We're going to break all the optical performance down in detail at the end of the review, so stay tuned for that if you're interested in the kind of nitty-gritty of the details. If you just want the overview, I'll give you just a quick rundown of optical performance in my experience. So the first positive note is there's basically no distortion here. I could do a tiny correction of maybe a -1, but frankly, you probably wouldn't even notice in any kind of real-world conditions. Vignette, on the other hand, is heavier. We've got about 3 stops of vignette in the corners. It improves a little bit as you stop down, but it never goes away altogether. Again, positive is there is very good control of aberrations on the 28mm, which by the way is better in this than the 35mm. So I saw almost no longitudinal chromatic aberrations, very, very minimal fringing before and after the plane of focus. I also saw basically no lateral chromatic aberrations near the corners of the frame. So that's a very strong performance when it comes to that. If If we look at the overall sharpness and contrast, we find breaking it down, and this is at 200% magnification. So yes, torture test, and I reviewed on 61 megapixels of resolution. Actually used both a manual adapter and then the Techart LM-EA9 adapter, which gives you a little bit of autofocus. That gives you M-mount lenses on Sony E-mount. I don't own a Leica body. And so I was testing on a 61 megapixel Sony A7R Mark V for these tests, just so you know. And so I found that there was good center performance, there was okay mid performance, and there was fairly weak corner performance. Now, I did find that real world results looked a little bit better, mostly because you're not composing in the extreme corners at f1.4 in real world shots typically, but also because the lens has such nice rendering that I just liked the overall results, and so it gave me a more positive feel. The center will become very crisp by f2, the mid-frame very crisp by f4, and the corners very crisp by f5.6. So you can, if you wanted to use this lens as a landscape lens, you could do so after you stop it down. I found kind of peak consistent performance across the frame at f8, and there is, after that, diffraction will start to slightly soften the image, but even by f16, which is minimum aperture, I really didn't find that the images looked too bad. The bokeh from this lens is actually really nice. So looking at it on the technical side first, there is, of the geometry, there's a little bit of cat eye, deformation near the corners of the frame with specular highlights. In some cases, that will give you a little bit of that swirl effect. You'll either like or dislike that depending on your taste. By f2, it's almost perfectly round all across the frame. And because, remember, there's that 14-bladed aperture iris, after that point, if you can create specular highlights or bokeh balls, you will find that they tend to be really nice and circular because that aperture blades is so nice and circular. In situations where you don't have specular highlights and it's more just about a creamy background, I found that up close you could get a really nice and creamy background. And even at more medium distances, I found that that kind of what I call the transition zone was actually handled fairly well. So bokeh quality from the lens and the overall look and rendering I think is quite nice. The lens also exhibited surprisingly good flare resistance. Wide open with like light coming through the windows, I found that what bit of kind of veiling was there was actually quite artistic, kind of gave a warm glow to images. And then directly facing into the sun, even when stopping down, I saw just basically one kind of ghosting artifact that wasn't too big and not too destructive. So positive there. I did test for coma, though in using the Techart, it's a little bit tough sometimes to nail infinity focus in that kind of setting. The movement of the actual adapter can kind of work against you. So my results are not perfectly focused. However, what I did find is that there is a little bit of coma smear in the corners. It's not terrible, but this lens wouldn't be what I would call a top astrophotography pick either. In general, I really liked the look of the images that I got from the Thypoch Simera 28mm F1.4. And so in summation, I think that Thypoch has really done a pretty good job here of nailing a lot of the Leica aesthetic and the lens design, but also a lot of the Leica aesthetic when it comes to the image quality, and obviously at a much, much lower price point. I enjoyed using the Simera 28mm F1.4. I will confess, I do have a little bit of a weakness for nicely executed manual focus lenses, and in this case, I think that that's what they've done. So I enjoyed using the lens. I think the question remains of how the market is going to receive this. The Leica brand is unique amongst most modern photography brands, and those who have bought into the Leica system, I don't know for sure whether they're open to a non-established brand like this. Maybe they are, and obviously there's always going to be some disparity of opinion across any kind of group of photographers, but I guess the market will determine whether or not people are looking for, an off-brand lens like this new Thypoch lens for their Leica body. But if you happen to be open to a far less expensive alternative for your Leica body, take a look at the Thypoch Simera 28mm F1.4. If you like 28mm, this is a pretty nice one. Now, if you want to go into a deeper dive of the optical performance, stay tuned. We're going to jump into that right after this.
Okay, let's take a deeper dive into the image quality performance, starting with the vignette and distortion. You can see that the uncorrected image on the left, that there is basically almost nothing to correct there as far as the distortion. Very, very minimal. I do use a -1 here on the right, but you really can't hardly tell a difference. Vignette is much more obvious. I used a +73 to correct for the vignette in the corners and move the midpoint most of the way over. You'd see that give us a nice cleanup. That's about 3 stops. Now, many wide aperture lenses like this do suffer from longitudinal chromatic aberrations, but that's really not much of an issue here. As you can see, there is just a tiny bit of fringing before and after the plane of focus. It is not very pronounced at all, and if I take a look at something like this with shiny and reflective surfaces, I can see, yes, just the tiniest bits of fringing, but as we go towards the bokeh highlights, very minimal there, and as we move out of focus, I see only just the slightest bit of fringing, but not enough that you're really going to notice it on the whole image at all. Lateral chromatic aberrations are even, if anything, are less pronounced, and you can see in these transitions from black to white near the edge of the frame that everything is really, really nice and clean. So as noted previously, I'm doing this test on a 61 megapixel Sony a7R Mark V, so very high resolution level. I'm showing you these results at 200%. So we can see that wide open contrast isn't perfect, but there is a lot of detail there in the center of the frame, looking really quite good. I'm going to go to the left here, and we can see that the mid frame looks, again, its contrast is not fantastic, but there is a good amount of detail that's being captured there. And down here on the left side, we can see that, there's still some work to do in the corners, but it's not like there's no image quality here either. As noted in my summary, I kind of liked my real-world results even better than what that suggests. For one thing, if you're looking just at 100% magnification level, that really looks quite good. There's no issues there with the detail that I'm seeing. And moreover, just the overall look and rendering of the image looks quite good here in my sauna, and so you can see it's handling the light coming through the window there quite well. And if we look here, obviously it's going to be a fairly narrow depth of field. You can see it's not pen sharp, but there's plenty there to make this image look credible, and thus overall I really like the look of the image. One final here, and I can't remember if this was f1.4 or f1.8, but you can see here I wanted to use a shallow depth field and use the contrast of this old abandoned barn with the kind of the whiteout around it of the fresh snow. And if we punch in there to a pixel level, you can see, again, it's not what I would call pen sharp, but you can see there's a perfectly usable amount of detail, and I like the look of the image overall. Now, stopping down to f1.8 does give us more contrast in the center of the frame. Over in the mid frame, the results, again, there's a little bit more contrast there, and you can see that the brighter areas are brighter. To the corners, it's not enough to really improve the resolution much, but again, you can see that contrast is improved some with some brighter looking edges. Now, f1.8 to f2 makes a more marked improvement in the contrast in the center of the frame, with the center looking what I would consider pretty much pen sharp at this point. The mid frame is also improving and looking better, not 100% there yet, and the corners not a huge leap ahead yet there. By f2.8 to f4, even at f2.8 here, we can see that the detail's looking really, really good. Contrast is looking excellent. And if I pop down here once again and I look towards the edge, you can see it is starting to improve, and it's going to be better still if we stop down to f4 and then to f5.6, where the corners are looking really fantastic now. So for landscape type shots where you're looking for detail all across the frame, if you stop it down, in this case, I wouldn't call the corners looking as good on 61 megapixels, but overall the image looks nice and crisp. I mean, it's an image you would be perfectly happy with. Here's another shot here that even if we look into the foreground, everything looks really nice. And then as we look on towards infinity, everything is captured looking really nicely right off to the edge of the frame. And so here's an image that I feel like really held up well and shows off what the lens is capable of. So after f8, diffraction will start in a little bit at f11, though you can see it still looks really good. And then minimum aperture of f16, you can see by comparison that it is softer, but it's not unusable either. And you can see even down into the corners that there still is a useful amount of information. So I wouldn't be against using that even at f16. Now, as noted previously, our minimum focus distance is only 40 centimeters, and so magnification isn't super high. Detail doesn't look too bad here up close, however. It's still what I would consider usable for sure. A quick closer look at that bokeh geometry, you can see that we're definitely getting some of that lemon shape towards the corners of the frame. If I stop down to f2, it's not completely circular, but you can see it looks acceptably circular. By f2.8, everything is looking better, and of course, you're going to continue to have really nice results due to having that really circular aperture. We can also see, because of low chromatic aberrations and a good amount of contrast, that there's a great amount of detail that's there even on some of these shiny and reflective surfaces. Now, of course, the lens doesn't focus particularly close. I was able to get a little bit closer due to using the Techart adapter. That is one advantage of that. But you can see that the detail is good there. But I mean, this is obviously a really creamy type of background here. In this case, at f1.4, where I'm back a little bit further, you can see a little bit of that swirl effect due to the specular highlights there. So whether you like or dislike that, it's there. Now, flare resistance was, again, quite good. I really liked how it handled shots like this, which is important to me because this is the kind of shot that I would like to take with a lens like this. So you've got some bright light coming through a window source, and you can see that everything's got a little bit of a warm glow, but there's no kind of damage to the image. In this shot here, once again, backlit, and so the sun's coming through fairly intensely there, but we can see at large aperture here that there's just a bit of a glow, but there's no big ghosting artifacts. As you stop down a bit, you do get a little bit more of these kind of blobs, but nothing too severe, and so I wasn't put off by that performance at all. And as noted, with the caveat of not being able to focus perfectly for this, we can see that as we move off towards the edge of the frame, you can see that the star points are deforming a little bit, and so they're becoming not quite like full-on flying birds, but almost a little triangular in shape. And so that is the evidence of coma going on there. And so it's not a terrible performance, but neither is it a good one either when it comes to coma. Overall, however, though, I think that this lens really does pull off a very nice looking optical performance.
So thanks for watching to the end. I hope that this has helped you to get a better understanding of this lens and also this new brand. If you want more information, you can check the link below in the description to my full written review. Also, there are buying links there if you'd like to pick one of these up for yourself. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day and let the light in.